welcome to today's webcast on regional developments in investor education and protection, frauds and scams prevention in conjunction with IOSCO's World Investor Week 2021. I am Farah Halina Abdul Halim from the IOSCO Asia Pacific Hub. Investor education and protection are essential for a well-functioning and stable financial system. As the leading international policy forum for securities regulators, one of IOSCO's key objectives is to enhance investor protection and promote investor confidence in the integrity of securities markets. IOSCO has held World Investor Week campaigns annually since 2017 to raise awareness of the importance of investor education and protection and to highlight the various initiatives of securities regulators in these two critical areas. One of the main themes of World Investor Week 2021 is on frauds and scams prevention. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused psychological, market, and economic stress on firms and retail investors, and many parts of the world are still going through significant impact on their daily lives. Notably, we have witnessed its impact on retail investors and a surge in scams occurring in Asia and across the world, with bad actors capitalizing on unknowing retail investors in these testing times. To share their perspectives on this matter, we have several Asia-Pacific members of the IOSCO Committee 8 or C8 with us today. C8 was established in 2013 with a primary mandate to conduct IOSCO's policy work on retail investor education and financial literacy. Joining us from different parts of Asia are Dora Lee, General Manager of the Investor and Financial Education Council in Hong Kong, Mr. Sundaresan, Executive Director of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, Jawahar Ali Amir Ali, Deputy General Manager of the Consumer and Investor Office at the Securities Commission Malaysia, and Abigail Ng, Executive Director of Money Sense at the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Without further ado, let me kickstart today's discussion with the first question, which I will address to all speakers. Can you share with us some observations on the rising or more pressing issues in relation to investment scams? Perhaps we could begin with you, Dora.
Thank you. In Hong Kong, we witnessed a huge surge in financial scams amid the COVID-19 pandemic since last year. According to the Hong Kong police, over 15,000 scam cases were recorded in 2020. It's up 90% compared to 2019. The rising trend continued with a total of over 8,700 scam cases only in the first half of 2021. According to the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC in Hong Kong, 1/5 of market manipulation cases under investigation are ramp and dump scams on social media platforms such as Facebook, WhatsApp, and WeChat. In a typical scheme, the scammers choose a thinly traded small cap stock, often with a small group of shareholders holding most of the shares, and use different means to ramp up the share price. Investors are then approached on the popular social media platforms, sometimes by an attractive member of the opposite sex, and urged to follow the advice of experienced investment teacher or follow what appears to be the social media account of a well-known stock commentator, or even claiming that they have inside information and suggest buying a share whose price does rise as predicted. So after enough unwary investors buy the stocks, the scammers dump the whole shares at an artificially high price, causing the price to collapse. The victims will not be able to contact the fraudsters after the crash. So during the year, the FSC has frozen over 115 million US dollars of assets involving more than 109 accounts as investigation continues. This is a very alarming and challenging situation, and it is also very difficult to estimate the actual number of victims and their losses unless they came out to report.
Thank you, Dora, for sharing your observations on how fraudsters have been leveraging on social media and the rise in ramp and dump scams. Mr. Sundaresan, could you share your observations on investment scams that you have seen in India?
Thank you. In Indian securities market, trading based on non-public information was one of the biggest problems. And front-running and insider trading are the two major market misconduct which have been seen over a period of time. But as we all have faced, pandemic has posed second difficulties as well as second challenges. Despite the challenge, the retail investors have started trading in large number in Indian securities market, especially in the last 18 months. Now, taking advantage of this type of swelling retail investors' interest in the market, certain entities have, trying to misguide these investors either by mis-selling or by giving some sort of tips in the various media. Now, as we all know, media has been used as a potent tool for various purposes, but it has been used for right purposes as well as for the wrong purposes. Now, the second entities, what they do is that they share certain recommendations in the media and also trade based on that information which they are actually recommending in the media. Now, the analysts and the anchors who appear in shows, what they do is that they make certain recommendations on the media on a particular day. And and because of their popularity, they ensure that there is a, swing in the prices or in the volume because of that recommendation. But what they do is on the previous day, they buy the shares of the same shares which they are going to recommend on the following day. And on the following day, because of the recommendation and because of the swinging, price as well as the volume, they reverse their position. And it is becoming very challenging to address these type of problems. For example, in 2021 in January, SEBI took action on a particular news anchor. In that case, he was conducting one of the very popular shows in a business channel called CNBC Awas. What he was doing was that he comes in a morning show at 7:20 a.m. before the market opens, and he used to make certain recommendations. Then, on the previous day, he used to place orders and buy second shares in the name of his wife and in the name of his mother. And on the following day, after making recommendations, what he used to do was that he used to offload those shares in the market. Now, when SEBI analyzed the transactions in the market and also correlated with the various shows which he has conducted and also the recommendations he made, to our surprise, we found that almost all the shares in which he has recommended, he has traded. And because of that, he has earned a huge profit of close to 30 billion Indian rupees, that is about $400,000. So SEBI took action and also debarred those entities from the market, from trading, and also impounded the illegal gain. So this is one of the recent type of scams we have come across, and we are also taking steps how to ensure that the investors are not cheated by these type of latest schemes of cheating. And this is all from India.
Thank you, Mr. Sunaraisan, for sharing this case with us. Yeah, popular personalities can indeed have a lot of influence on retail investors, and this can be advantageous in some ways. Unfortunately, it can also lead to scams like this. Let me now turn to you, Jawahar. Could you share your observations on any investment scams in Malaysia during recent times?
Yeah, thank you, Farah. I think similar to other jurisdictions, I think as the pandemic was unfolding last year, there was a sudden surge, in the rise in scams. As we know, these scammers, they tend to capitalize on fears and hardship from major crises like the COVID-19 pandemic to manipulate vulnerable and unsuspecting members of the public. And they have also since become quite sophisticated in their approach and in their tactics. And in Malaysia, what we have seen is that there has been a significant rise of what we term as clone firm scams, where the scammers, they will impersonate a legitimate, licensed entity to dupe investors into believing that they are investing with a legitimate entity. So this is something that we've observed quite, notably at the beginning of last year. And what the scammers will do is that, they will use names, logos, and other details of a legitimate firm to promote a bogus investment schemes. These investment schemes does not exist. So how they will do is that, they will say, for example, I am from, entity, investment bank ABC, which is actually licensed by the Securities Commission Malaysia, and they will, which will lend credence to the unsuspecting member of the public, and they will send via, most often than not, these scams are perpetrated through social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and also notably through WhatsApp and Telegram of late. So they will, how it works is that, a member of public will be surfing the Facebook, and then there will be a paid ad to say there is this amazing investment opportunity, which you should not miss. And then once the member of public clicks on it, they will then be taken to a WhatsApp conversation with the scammer, and then the scammer will then be sending pictures of oh, look, I am licensed, all fake and forged certificates of legitimate entities. Mostly it's local, but we have also seen a number of even foreign famous foreign-based entities. They impersonate some of the foreign famous based entities, and they say that, oh, you can with this. So usually the amount that we invested would be pretty small, and the promise of return is actually ludicrous. Sometimes you say that you just put in $100 and you will be promised a return of $2,000 within the next day. As ludicrous as it may sound, but it is sad, but there are a lot of the members of the public who are falling for this kind of scam. So what then happens is that once the nominal amount is paid, then then the scammer will say, hey, you've actually made your profit, you've already made your X amount, but in order for you to withdraw, you just need to pay some administrative charges, some exchange clearing fees, some income tax and whatever, and then they will continue to do so until such time that the victim realizes that they have been scammed. So this is what we have been seeing. One of the major concern that we have seen in terms of scams in Malaysia. That's all from Malaysia. Farah, over to you.
Thank you, Jauhar. Clone firm scams are certainly something investors should watch out for. And like you said, they can be very convincing. We'll come back to discuss the measures taken to address this issue. But first, if I could turn to you, Abigail, has there been an increase in investment scams in Singapore? And could you share your observations with us?
Thanks, Farah. Thanks for having me here to share. I think similar to all around the world, and we've heard from our colleagues here today, investment scams are unfortunately on the rise, and in many countries, and definitely including in Singapore. So the Singapore police has seen an increase in reports on investment scams over the years. And just to give you a kind of like a ballpark figure, since 2018, we've actually seen a threefold increase in the number of investment scam reports. So there has been also a marked increase we have noticed for the first half of 2021. As compared to year-on-year statistics. For us, MES, we also we get complaints as well, and we similarly saw an increase in complaints on investment scams in particular. And from the feedback received, these scams actually usually involve cryptocurrency investments and unlicensed trading platforms. So just to share a little bit more about these two common modus that we see. As I think Jawahar mentioned, right, scammers are really getting quite ingenious in the tactics. So for cryptocurrency investment scam in particular, what we've noticed is scammers are baiting victims, right? Again, through online posts or advertisements on social media account, so like Facebook and all as well. So what they would do is they would actually post comments on popular crypto-related videos And then they will say, oh, I've earned really great returns from so and so, check this out. So these are obviously fake posts. And so that's one modus that we noticed they've used. The other one is we've seen fake news articles. Sometimes they even post a real news channel header, and it features prominent Singaporean personalities, either, TV stars or even politicians who appear to be saying that, oh, I've made a lot of money from cryptocurrency, or I'm backing this particular cryptocurrency firm, so come and invest. So this has been happening a little bit. So all these ads and fake news, basically, we know at the end of the day, they want to attract, kind of like hook and lure the victims into the scammer's website. So once they get to the website, I think there are two types, right? One is basically a phishing site where they basically get your contact details or they get your credit card details. There are some, of course, that go a little bit deeper, right? Basically, after they get your contact details, they actually contact you with a call, and then they'll persuade the victim to invest by transferring money into usually an overseas bank account or credit card payments. So that is something that we've seen in Singapore. So the other type of scams that we've noticed a bit on the rise is what we term unlicensed trading platforms. So the tactic is a little bit different. So the scammers play a little bit of a longer game here, right? They kind of like meet their victim through chats or social media, and then they kind of like become a friend. And after that, they say, hey, I've kind of like got a tip, I've got a lobang for you, right? Come open a trading account with this guy I know. And then you know how the story ends, right? Then it's either through trades on a website, or they make them download a mobile application. So after transferring a certain amount of money, the broker would then give instructions to buy or sell certain stocks. And of course, in the initial few trades, they're going to make a lot of money, right? And you can see on your app or your account on the website that you're actually making these very generous profits. That kind of like encourages the victim, the scammer will encourage the victim to put in more, right? To basically make more money. But as we know, as Joa has shared as well, the minute more money goes in and you try to exit, that website is not going to work. Nobody's going to return their calls, or the app suddenly ceases to exist. So that's what we've noticed. And I think, just to share a bit about why do we see this happening lately, right? I think apart from COVID, which has been mentioned by some of the colleagues here today, I think it's the increased online access and use of social media, which is very prevalent. So for Singapore especially, we have a really high internet penetration rate, almost 90%. You have a lot of people who have more than one device. So we observe that they're spending a lot of time on online platforms, which gives, I guess, the scammers more reach. And another interesting thing which I thought would be interesting to share would be, so our police force has a behavioral science center, and they've actually kind of did research, and youth and adults aged between 20 and 39 years old are actually the most vulnerable to online scams. Mainly because they're tech savvy and they spend a lot of their time on social media, increasing their exposure.
Thank you, Abigail, for sharing with us your observation and also some of the factors that are contributing to this. As you pointed out, also, scammers are using more effective tactics, and it's important for investors to be aware of the levels of sophistication that scammers are currently adopting. Dora, you spoke about the rise in ramp and dump scams earlier. Could you tell us about some measures that have been taken to address this?
Yes. So in view of this alarming situation in Hong Kong, plus the increasing number of scam cases, we take the approach to raise awareness among investors and also at the same time exposing the scam tactics to the public. We use TV commercials and social media videos because amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, people are still, a lot of them still relied on working from home and also stay at home. TV and social media are the main communication channels. And for the first time, we also developed an anti-scam online quiz using our Chin family little cat to make it more approachable to both adults, elderly, housewives, or even children, so that they can help the public to understand the do's and don'ts behaviors in social media platforms using real-life scenarios. We are quite happy that the campaign videos are quite well received, generating around 9.5 million views for the online quiz. There are around 52,000 page visits. We also host a Facebook live session by a colleague from the SFC enforcement team to talk about the cases whereby how these scam and dump cases work. There are also two popular investment market commentators who were victims of these scams because they were previously impersonated by fraudsters as part of their scams. So they can just share their real experience. The session attracted over 95,000 video views. And after the campaign, we conducted the IFEC Retail Investor Study Survey in April. The findings are quite encouraging. Around 65% of the investors responded that they were aware of the ramp and dump scams, or at least by the name. However, from the survey findings, we learned that more efforts will have to be required to sustain the momentum. For example, by increasing the level of understanding of these scams. And in particular, we should target more among the female and young investors. So these are the key measures that we take in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Dora. It's great to see that the campaigns and programs run by IFAC has gained a lot of traction. It's also promising to know that the survey showed a significant number of respondents were aware of ramp and dump scams. Mr. Sundaresan, going back to the case you had shared regarding the stock recommendation scam, could you tell us about measures undertaken by SEBI to address these scams that are carried out through the media?
It's not only for India, but overall the basic challenges can be put into privacy laws, freedom of speech, jurisdiction limitations. These are the reasons which are cited basically, which actually poses challenges to the regulators all over the world. And India is no exception to that. So if we have to address these type of challenges, SEBI has taken two types of steps. One is how to ensure that these type of scamsters are being caught and punished. And the second is how to make the investors aware of so that they do not fall prey to this type of scamsters. So the first aspect is we have to strengthen our surveillance facilities, because technology is the one through which we can actually find out who is coming on the channel, who is giving this type of what we call the messages, and when they are trading, how to correlate their transactions in the market vis-a-vis the messages they are communicating through the medium of whether it is what we call TV or social media, whichever be the medium of communication. So what we are doing is that we are actually developing a new system called picture-based integrated news information analyzer. What it tries to do is that it tries to capture the picture which comes on the TV screen and also converts that into a readable form and then correlates with the trading which has taken place on the previous day or on the following day, so that it tries to match what the person has told and what is the volume of trading in that particular script and how the price has moved. Then if there is a significant impact, then we try to analyze whether any person connected with that anchor has also traded in the script, and if so, we would like to take the matter forward. So this is as far as from the surveillance angle. Now, as far as the investor is concerned, we have to educate. We have been educating them by giving time and again press releases in the media that not to fall for prey for this type of scamsters messages. And also we have issued multiple what we call messages through the media by TV, by print media, and also using the digital media, making the investors aware of this type of, what you call the misconduct which is going on and what type of precautions they were supposed to take. In addition to that, we have also told the stock exchanges, and based on our advice, the stock exchanges keep on sending SMSs and other messages, and they also release advertisements in the media, cautioning the investors that these are all the things which are going on and what type of what you call risk profiling they have to do for themselves before taking an investment call. So that is how we are doing two-pronged strategy we have adopted. One, enhancing the surveillance capabilities of the SEBI and also educating the investors.
Thank you, Mr. Sudaresan. It's very interesting to hear how SEBI is enhancing surveillance capabilities, making use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data analytics. Thank you for sharing. Jawahar, you had spoken about clone firm scams earlier. Could you share with us the approach taken by SC Malaysia in addressing this?
All right, thanks, Farah. Similar to most jurisdictions, I think that, a lot of emphasis will need to be placed on investor education. I think it's a given. We hold the mantra that, that an informed investor is a protected investor. And as many of us would know, if we have any experience in enforcement, it takes time. So a reactive approach would not cut it when we are dealing with this kind of a real time scams where they mushroom and then they operate, and then some of these scams, they only operate for a few months and then they are no longer around. So we realize that, as I've said, enforcement action alone will not cut it. And we have to continue to empower the investors with the right knowledge and how to identify these scams and not fall prey. Not fall prey to those kind of scams. And the first thing that we did when we realized that this is a problem is that we took out a press release. We said, look, hey guys, we have seen a rise in clone firm scams, so please be aware. And then and immediately with that, we followed through with that with a continuous update on our SC's investor alert list with identified clone firms as early warning to the public. And I think as in most jurisdictions, we also have a investor alert list. And previously, we used to populate it, every now and then, but then with this, we try to turn it around. So we try to do it within 48 hours of us receiving information. And we already put it onto the alert list. So we expedited the process of including an entity onto our alert list, and also we ramped up our social media messaging. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We take out daily postings through our channels to continuously educate the investing public. And we have even to make it a bit more interesting. We've even used a famous local comedian, stand-up comedian, for him to come up with a video on how to spot this kind of scams and whatnot. And what we've also done, again, as I've said, a proactive approach was deemed necessary. So, in addition to putting an entity or warning the public about an entity, what we will do is we work very closely with the Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission. So they are the entity that's in charge of, or they could facilitate into the blocking of websites or blocking of access of certain website that was promoting this kind of scams. Of late, I'm not sure about the other jurisdiction. We've had a fair bit of success with Facebook. So we've had open communication with Facebook. So as I mentioned, a lot of these scams are perpetrated through Facebook. So Facebook is now helping us to do what we call geo-block. That means that they will block access of these. Or some of these scams perpetrated with the Facebook. And previously, it was a bit of a difficulty to try to do that, but of course, of late, I think we've had quite a bit of success in that field. Given our what do you call frequent messaging onto our social media pages, our websites, and everything, it has actually resulted in the number of queries and complaints that we receive to be multifold. This also gives us an opportunity, for us to just, warn the public. They call us. We have so many people calling us to ask us what we call to check on the legitimacy. To say they call, hey, is this particular? We will immediately want them to say no, don't put your money in here, and so on and so on and so forth. So. All this in accumulation is what we are doing to try to arrest or try to combat this menace. And of course, from the enforcement front, we have assembled a task force to investigate some of these cases where where we can. But as I've said, it's a challenge, because they move around very fast, and given that they exist, on the internet, it's a bit it's not easy for us to track them down and to what do you call to try to eradicate this problem. I listen with interest what a friend from Hong Kong mentioned just now, that the demographic of the victims that fell victim to this are youths, which coincides with the amount of time, especially given the pandemic, the amount of time that the youth spend online. That'll be all from me, Sarah.
Thanks, Jawahar. As you said, empowering investors with the right knowledge to be able to protect themselves is certainly important. It's great to hear about all the measures undertaken by the SC Malaysia in this regard. It's also great to see that more and more investors are making inquiries to verify the legitimacy of financial entities and investment schemes before they invest. Abigail, could you share with us some of the measures taken by the MAS to minimize the risk of investors falling prey to investment scams?
Sure, Farah, happy to. I think we all know, as we've said, informed investor is an empowered investor, right? So under MAS's Money Sense program, educating the public on investment scams in general, it's always one of our evergreen topics. We do this together with other government agencies, as well as industry partners, such as investor advocate groups or the banking associations as well. So of course, pre-pandemic, you used to hold a lot of public seminars, roadshows, and workshops on a range of these topics. But given since the pandemic, we've been working with our partners to pivot to a virtual platform, much like what we're having here now. So the upside of that, though, we miss, of course, having that face-to-face and personal interaction. The upside is that we found that the reach, when we pivoted online, has been quite good. So there's always a silver lining. We also have been running campaigns. So we do campaigns to raise awareness, in particular for investment scams. And we did our first one in 2017, where we launched basically our campaign tagline, which is ask, check, and confirm. Right. So basically, it's to focus on investment scams, saying that you have to ask as many questions as you need to understand the investment opportunity fully. You have to check on the company, its owners, directors, and management members to assess, if the opportunity is genuine and credible, and confirm. What are you going to confirm? You have to confirm the company or the representative's credentials using available resources. So these kind of resources are things that we can find on the MAS official website. So we basically tell people they have to check 3 resources. One, the financial institutions directory, to check that whether the entity that they want to deal with is actually a regulated entity or not. The register of representatives, where if they key in the register, the name or registration number, they can check if that particular person is a registered official representative. And then the other one is our investor alert list, which I think many jurisdictions have as well. So we basically in 2017, I think that was just before the internet or the online kind of like explosion of social media, right? So in 2017, what we had picked up as the scam of focus was actually involving gold. So I'm not sure whether other jurisdictions had experienced it. It was these gold investment schemes or gold buyback schemes. At the time, they were really quite rampant. The other one was resort property investments, right? Basically, they say buy a share in a property resort, in some island, and you're going to get great returns. So those were the focus then. We actually ran kind of like ads in the papers and see who had indicated interest to invest, and then once they basically go to the website, they'll be told, hey, you could have been scammed, if you thought this was a genuine opportunity. And then we taught them how to look out for the red flags, basically investment returns that were ludicrous, basically telling them it was a time limited offer. So fast forward to 2021, as I mentioned, the scams that we spotted are very different now. No gold, not property. It's on cryptocurrencies and online trading, right? So we just finished a 3-month campaign that ended in June. and focused on these two topics. And given that it's to an online audience and to a demographic, as I mentioned, that is very much always on, I don't know, in social media, this campaign was different from the 2017 one. There was no print link of it. It was just on digital platforms, right? So we pushed it out on Facebook, IG, paid ads. So we thought that would match the demographic better. So some of the key campaign messages I think would be very familiar to everybody here. Please look out for red flags such as high returns at low or no risk. Pressure tactics, once there's a pressure tactics, please beware. Fake track records or fake testimonials, something that you really have to look out for. So I think just to share maybe a little bit more on cryptocurrencies, because it's something gaining quite a lot of attention, I think, globally. So since 2018, MAS issued 6 consumer advisories alerting consumers of fraudulent websites, which I mentioned earlier, soliciting crypto investments. It's really hard, right, to figure out the credibility of such token sellers, because actually it's also new. You don't know who has a track record. And I think we've gone out quite strongly to keep saying that, look, the value of cryptocurrencies is highly speculative, it's non-transparent, and basically at the moment there is no MAS legislative protection if you purchase cryptocurrencies on these unlicensed platforms. So basically we also have been emphasizing that please deal in your investments with firms and persons who are regulated by the MAS. If you do not deal with regulated persons, as a consumer, you're actually giving up a lot of these protections and safeguards that have come with it. All these messages we push out on our website articles. We also post on MoneySense Facebook, MoneySense Instagram. We have to kind of like keep up with the times, so we collaborate with social media influencers, like I think Malaysia has as well, people who are familiar to the youth, content creators, comic strips and things like that. So I think that has been quite useful. So we have seen comments from the public that say, oh, it's really good that you're sharing this, because I do know of friends who've gotten scammed. Some will share views on prevention tips. Others commented that this content is really relatable, they understand it, and then they'll tag their friends. So that has been really quite encouraging.
Thanks, Abigail. Thanks for sharing. It's great to hear about all these measures undertaken at the MAS, and also thanks for sharing with us the key messages from MoneySense's latest campaign. I would like to ask my next question to all speakers. Going forward, what is your focus for investor education and protection in relation to scams and frauds prevention? Perhaps, Dora, we could start with you.
Thank you. In Hong Kong, I think the adoption of digital financial management is actually increasing, probably accelerated by the COVID-19, as well as like what Abigail was talking about, more segments are getting these online services, and they are always on. Even a lot of elderly are learning how to use or manage their finance through digital apps and all that. So that's why we are placing more emphasis on the basics of digital financial literacy as part of our investor education and protection efforts. Firstly, we need to educate people that they need to understand the digital financial products and services that they are using, and that they understand the risks and be very careful about cybersecurity and data privacy. We also need to educate the public to understand the do's and don'ts to protect themselves from investment and financial scams. So these are our major focus in terms of education and also consumer protection. We are a very small organization. That's why we need to collaborate very closely with our stakeholders, including the FSC, other financial regulators, the Hong Kong police, NGOs, schools, academics, and even industry organizations, so that we can all have concerted efforts. We also need to keep a close eye on the latest development of the trending scam tactics, so that we can warn and alert the investors in good time. Last but not least, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the IOSCO Committee Chairman Pascal, the Secretariat, the World Investor Week Working Group Chairman Vasco, all the working group members and all the members of the committee for their excellent efforts and sharing of valuable experience and information so that we can all join up to fight against financial investment scams globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Yes, I agree with you totally. The need for higher rates of digital financial literacy has never been more prevalent. And collaborating with a variety of stakeholders, as you said, would help your initiatives reach a wider audience. Mr. Sundaresan, could you tell us about SEBI's focus for investor education and protection going forward?
Yes. As I said earlier, there are two ways of doing. One is protecting the interest of investors. The other is the education of investors. Now, protecting the investors basically by ensuring that whoever is involved in this type of scams are being punished, being caught as swiftly as possible. So for that, as I said, we are taking a lot of efforts, strengthening our technological tools, whether it is big data analytics or machine learning or artificial intelligence, so that our surveillance efforts are faster, investigation is speeded up, and these people are just caught as soon as possible and they are punished. Now, coming to education, unlike other jurisdictions, India faces a very peculiar problem because in most of the jurisdictions, the language used and mostly accepted is English. But in India, we have multiple languages. So the investors are, from different parts of the country where people speak different languages. So we have to educate the investors in a language which could be easily understood and absorbed by the investors. So keeping that in mind, SEBI has recently just launched a program called SMART, S-M-A-R-T. The expansion for that is Securities Market Trainers. Now we have identified, like college professors or the school teachers or people who are familiar with the financial products. We have selected them and we have trained them. Despite these pandemic times, we have taken the efforts of training them and also ensure that they are able to communicate these messages to the investors in the local languages of the respective cities or the states wherever the investors are from. So these trainers are expected to understand the nuances of the securities market as well as the types of scams and other things which are taking place. And SEBI has also prepared the presentations for them, the material for them, so that they can use during their campaigns. And whatever the cost involved for that, SEBI actually bears those costs for conducting those campaigns by these trainers. The second aspect is that we do go for media releases. We have tied up with various media channels that we release advertisements and also educate the investors regarding the risk associated with the particular product. And we also suggest them that those people who are not having time to do their own analysis, they should prefer to go for schemes like mutual funds or ETFs. And also we plan to educate investors to rely upon the sources which are authentic, refer to the websites of the stock exchanges or the depositories or the regulator or the listed companies, go through the annual reports. And today being, everything is available in digital. We are planning to tell all the everybody to provide all the information through the email or through the mobile of the various investors, because we have made giving the mobile number and the email ID as a mandatory requirement in the stock market, so that all the communication can be sent to them through these channels, which will reach them faster. Of course, the other aspect is that investors also have responsibility to bring, if in case they find any sort of misconduct they notice in the market, to inform the regulator as swiftly as possible, so that regulator can also take action. So for that purpose, we have a tool called the SCORES, SEBI compliance redressal system, so that in that the investors can lodge that complaint along with the documents available with them, so that SEBI can look into the complaint and take action and ensure that this type of people who are trying to misbehave in the market are caught and punished as swiftly as possible. So as I said, protection as well as education will go together to ensure that investors are well informed before they take any investment decision.
Thank you, Mrs. Sundarasan, for sharing several focus areas for investor education and some measures that are already being undertaken at SEBI. Jawahar, could you tell us about SE Malaysia's approach going forward in relation to scams and frauds prevention?
Yeah, I mean, I just have to echo what the other speakers have just spoken. I think investor education is more important than ever. Yeah, during this time. Let me just start off by just sharing findings of survey that we have done. And when we did the survey, and one of the questions that we asked to the members of the public or to the investing public, what would be a reasonable rate of return of your investment? And lo and behold, we've heard numbers like 24%, I know, the 30% as the expected rate of return. So now this is quite telling. This is quite telling. Now, what this then demonstrates is that these are the people who would be susceptible to scams. Because if your expected rate of return is as high as 30%. That's what if this is what you say that I demand this kind of a return, and then the only way that you'll be able to get such a return is by this promise by the scammers here. You see, so I mean, this is one of those things. So we felt that one of the most important messaging that we needed to get across is to constantly remind that if an investment proposal is too good to be true, then it probably is. So that is the first messaging. Now, throughout our as I said, it is investor education, and what we have then devised is that we devised 7 useful steps on how to avoid from being a victim of scam, and we send out this message consistently, and we send out this message regularly to make sure that it reaches to the public. Now, the first thing is that always be cautious of investments offered via social media platforms. You see, if someone were to just randomly, of course, it's inevitable given this time and age, a lot of advertisements will be taken off even by legitimate firms. But what we will always tell them is that, look, that if it is being offered through the social media, you want to double check. We just want to make sure, don't just randomly accept any offers just made through the social media platform. And one more thing which we firmly believe, and I think that this cuts across anywhere in the world, is that we tell the investing public that if anyone were to ask you to make a deposit for investment, never make the deposit into someone else's personal bank account. Now, as we know, if we have if we were to trade in the securities market and whatnot, we would be required to bank in our money into the official account of the stockbroking firm or the intermediary, and never do we have to deposit money into anyone's personal bank account, even if that individual is licensed. You see, so that's where one of the things that we feel that if we can get this one message across, I think 99% of the scams can be eradicated. That's what we, because most of the times the scams, they use a mule account. So we call it the mule account scams. When I mentioned just now about the clone firm scams. So how they operate is that they will require you to bank in money into a mule account. So, and these are random individuals, whose accounts are just merely being used as an instrumentality of a crime to commit the scam. And we always tell them, if you want to make any payment, you must always make up. The third point is that you must always make a payment to official bank account of authorized companies. And number 4, we always advise that if you want to deal, always only deal with authorized companies or individuals, and then the public can always check the register of an authorized person in the SE's website. So we have all the list of all the entities and individuals whom we license or we register. And we always, we made a conscious attempt to make our investor alert list much more visible. So what we do now is that, concurrent with us putting something on the alert list, we take out a social media posting on IG, Twitter, so that it reaches to the so that the public are more aware, and that a name has been included onto the alert list. Because previously, when we put it, it's on there, it's on our website, but somebody's got to make sure that they click it a few times. So we try to make sure that it just surfaces on your what you call social media pages, every now and then when we put it there. So and then we will also get our police. I think our police have done an excellent job in coming up with a portal, where what the portal contains is that when they receive a police report with respect to a particular bank account that's being used to commit a scam, they will upload the bank account number onto this portal, and also the telephone number that's being used, whereby the scammers will reach out to the victims. So they'll populate this information into a portal, and the public, and it's accessible. It is just like a mobile application. You can just download it, or it's a website. You can just key in the bank account number, and it will come up. Hey, this account is suspicious. Don't put your money into this account. So this is one of those things that since it's available, we create visibility to this portal. We'll tell the members of the public to say, hey guys, make sure if you receive any opportunity for investment or whatever, you just do these things. And then and of course, we always tell the public that they can always call us, and even during the pandemic, we made sure that that our hotline remains available throughout the pandemic. So even during the height of the pandemic, where there was a total lockdown, we made sure at least we had a couple of staffs in the office to take turns to answer the phone calls. So we believe that these are powerful steps that that Malaysians, if they practice this, especially like I said, this one message which you would like to send across very, very strongly: never deposit money into someone else's personal bank account. If this one message cuts across, I think I'm confident that most of the scams, firm scams or whatever, can be eradicated. As I just like to end that by saying that again, an informed investor is a protected investor. Over to you, Farah.
Thank you, Jawahar. That's a catchy phrase. An informed investor is a protected investor. And indeed, those 7 useful steps you had mentioned are good guidance, not just for Malaysians, but every investor listening in today. Abigail, could you share with us the focus going forward for the MAS?
Thanks, Farah. Sure. I think going forward, there are a lot of efforts, a lot of education efforts, a lot of enforcement efforts. But I think going forward, the way we're thinking about it is an ecosystem approach, right? Solving scams, there's no silver bullet, right? It's not something that's going to be solved easily, in the short term, and we can't do it alone. We have to do it the whole ecosystem. So I think for us, recognizing the increase in scams in recent years, we've kind of got together. There's an inter-ministry committee on scams, or called the IMCS, that was set up just last year in Singapore. So it's aimed to deter and prevent online scammers from carrying out their operations, find ways to mitigate losses incurred, and to ensure as well, of course, that public remains vigilant of scams. So this is an inter-ministry committee. MAS is part of it, and we're working together with other government agencies, such as, of course, the police force, as well as the telco regulator and other relevant agencies. So that has been really useful, getting people on the same page and pulling together. So, but the other part that we've been kind of thinking about, and probably we're working on a little bit more in the coming years, is that even as authorities, right, we all come together and step up efforts to combat scams. We can't do it alone. It's an ecosystem. There's the industry, whether it be your telcos, your e-commerce, or your banks. And then we have our consumers. I think everybody here has to play their part. And as scams and fraud and the different modus continues to evolve and change so quickly, we need everybody to kind of pull together and join hands to do this. So for example, to give you an enforcement example, and then I'll do an education example, the police, we have an anti-scam center they actually worked really closely with 6 banks, actually, in a 3-day joint operation. And together they conducted basically live interventions. So they sat together and analyzed fund flows of bank accounts that were identified from previous scam reports. So from certain data patterning, they could kind of like detect which were the ongoing scams, and they managed to intervene during that 3-day joint operation to disrupt, right, the scams that were happening. So they interrupted about 150 cases of investment scams and fake gambling platform scams. So that was we thought it was a really heartening example, of how public sector and private sector, we come together and we do something for the consumer. On the education front, we've also started off, and we're seeing some traction and success in the public and private partnership for anti-scam efforts. For MAS, of course, we work really closely with the Association of Banks in Singapore, the ABS. We're stepping up on consumer warnings and raising public literacy. So, for example, recently ABS helped to roll out quiz. So if you enter any of the banking apps before you kind of like do your transaction, you have the option to do this kind of like a quick scam quiz, right? To kind of like heighten the awareness of the consumer. In addition, now you don't only transact through banks, right? There are a lot of e-payments and e-wallets. So to keep online transactions and e-payments secure beyond banks, MAS has set up a task force with representatives from banks and these other key payment non-bank players, right, to review the practices that this upcoming industry can put in place to better protect customers against scams and fraudulent transactions. So together, we hope this review, we can put together fair, clear, and consistent approaches for liability apportionment should fraud payment transactions occur. That's always very traumatic for a consumer, apart from working together, of course, on education campaigns. So I think, apart from domestic efforts, I also want to thank C8 and IOSCO for organizing forums like these, because not only do we have our domestic agencies and industry players coming together, I think it will be really useful consumers all over the world for us to continue building regional and global partnerships and even perhaps having more global community of practices as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Abigail. I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of collaborations. Collaborating with different stakeholders is key to combat this issue. It's also great to hear about the success in anti-scam efforts in Singapore. Seems like sophisticated methods were being used to disrupt the investment scams taking place. And also what you had shared earlier about Money Senses campaign tagline, ask, check and confirm. I think that's another important message of today's webcast. So with that, thank you everyone for your time and for sharing your insights with us today. It's important that all members of the financial industry work together to create an environment where timely and relevant financial education is made easily available to retail investors, enabling them to make wise money decisions as well as to protect their assets in today's increasingly complex and rapidly evolving financial marketplace, especially against the current backdrop of struggling or recovering economies and accelerated digitalization of financial products and services. The need for investor education and financial literacy has never been more prevalent. We urge you to share the important messages from today's webcast, take part in your local World Investor Week initiatives, and encourage those within your networks to participate in these initiatives. For more information on this global campaign, please visit www.worldinvestorweek.org. Thank you.